Hello everybody, Adam Nicholas here for What Culture Wrestling, and as always, when Stone Cold Steve Austin brings out a new episode of the Broken Skull Sessions podcast, we are here to break it down for you, just in case you don't have time to watch it, or maybe just because you just want the best bits. Either way, his guest this week was the almighty Bobby Lashley. I think it's fair to say it was an almighty episode of the Broken Skull Sessions podcast. I'm Adam Nicholas, this is What Culture Wrestling, and these are 10 things we learned from Bobby Lashley on Stone Cold's Broken Skull Sessions podcast. Number 10, his terrifying bank robbery story. Now, back in 2004, Bobby Lashley looked like he was set to make the US Olympic team, but unfortunately, he ended up blowing his knee out and couldn't be part of it. Now, how did that happen? You might be asking yourself. Normally, this would happen if someone overexerted themselves at the gym or if they got injured during some training or something. No, not that. It was because he was part of a bank robbery, not doing one, but actually in a bank while it was being robbed, and he almost got shot. Yep, that's right. Lashley said that he was in the bank one day and a bunch of guys came in and started shooting up the place who were trying to rob the bank. He said he was dodging bullets and all kinds. He dropped to the floor to get out of harm's way, obviously, and he said when he sort of stayed calm and tried to help the people around him regain their composure, he looked down at his leg and he realised it had swollen up to the size of a football. Now, thankfully, he obviously made it out alive, but unfortunately that meant the end of his Olympic dream because of what happened to his knee. On top of that, during this whole interview, he didn't try to make out like he was, going to turn up and try and smash these guys. He was absolutely terrified, as you would be if someone started shooting at the bank, and basically said he was only thinking about trying to save his own life. Number 9, his trademark pose was improvised. Now, we all know Bobby Lashley's trademark pose with the fingers pointed and the arms stretched out looks like an absolute specimen. I think we can all agree, something that looks really pretty well rehearsed and well thought out, and Austin wanted to know who came up with the idea for that pose. But apparently Bobby said it wasn't anybody's idea. I mean, technically it was his, but it was just kind of improvised on the spot. As he was getting ready to go out through the curtain for his debut on SmackDown, WWE essentially said, do something. Go out there and do something. So on that 23rd of September edition of SmackDown back in 2005, out he comes, does the point, and the rest is history. So like quite a few of the really good things that happen in WWE, this was just a happy accident, something that nobody had particularly put any thought into, but they liked it so much they told him they wanted him to keep on doing it, and Austin was pretty surprised at that because it does seem like something WWE would have spent a long time nitpicking at to make sure it was absolutely perfect. Number 8, a 4-hour lunch with Paul Heyman. When Lashley was first in WWE, his actual name, the name that they had given him down in OVW in developmental, was Blaster Lashley. And when you've got such a terrible gimmicky name like Blaster Lashley, you're probably thinking nobody particularly cares about you, because this is not proof of that at all. So imagine Lashley's surprise when he suddenly got a phone call out of the blue from Paul Heyman, who said he wanted to meet him for a sit down and a chat at a local Denny's. Now, to begin with, Lashley wasn't exactly sure what was going on here. Was he about to get fired? Did Heyman not like something that he was doing down in OVW? The only thing he knew was that Heyman had been hired to come up with some creative for that brand. Thankfully though, Heyman just wanted to get to know Lashley better, and they ended up chatting for the better part of 4 hours about anything and everything to do with wrestling, but he said it was super casual. In the end, it seems that Heyman just felt like he didn't want Bobby Lashley to be this walking stereotype, or so he told him. He felt like there was more to be offered from young Blaster Lashley. Number 7, The Undertaker told him to stand up. After a few months of being on WWE's main roster, The Undertaker pulled Lashley to one side and told him that he needed to start standing up, standing tall, and appearing like the big presence that he actually was. With his history as a former amateur wrestler, Lashley had been crouching down and sizing up his opponents during matches, but Undertaker didn't like this at all because he felt like he was losing out on the real presence of the guy. Lashley immediately realised that he was going to have to get over his old amateur wrestling background and start to adapt to the ways of professional wrestling, because this is the world of entertainment, this isn't the world of fighting. And he said as soon as he did that, it was immediate to change. His puffing out his chest during entrances and during lockups to genuinely make him look as big and as beastly as he is. Regardless, Undertaker's advice for Lashley to stop working small obviously must have worked. The guy's a WWE champion now, and I think we can all agree the Almighty is not just a title. Number 6, he was oblivious to WWE ECW hate. That was a great moment in this interview where Lashley explains that he really didn't actually understand what all the hate was towards WWE's version of ECW, the thing that would actually drive Paul Heyman insane, as well as a bunch of ECW fans, and he even goes as far to say that he was completely oblivious to all the hatred. In Lashley's own words, he said, "I never read the dirt sheets or anything," which Austin found highly entertaining because he obviously, being on the pulse of pro wrestling, knew what the reaction was to WWE's version of ECW, that product, and it was hated by so many fans. But imagine Lashley just trying to be in the ring, going about his business, trying to get better as a wrestler, completely shutting all this out. It's kind of great, really. It would be years before he'd find out about all the fans who didn't end up going to December to dismember, or how angry they were at Vince McMahon's vision for what the ECW brand could be. While he did say he was proud to be the ECW champion, he realises and acknowledges that he was a very different kind of champion to the likes of the Sandman and Raven who came before him. I think that might be the understatement of the year. Number 5, Austin's perspective on WrestleMania 23. Now, another interesting insight from Stone Cold rather than one of his guests, but this talks about WrestleMania 23, of course, where Bobby Lashley was up against Umaga, and it was one of those matches where it should have had the crowd eating out the palm of their hands. But Austin says he and Vince were watching on and wondering to themselves, why are the fans not into this? Why is the sound so meh? But of course it wasn't until afterwards where everyone realised that most of the heat and pops that were coming from the crowd were going up instead of being directed towards the ring as a result of being at Detroit's Ford Field Stadium. Austin's fears though about the match just not doing well is quite an interesting take, because imagine if that's happening in real time. We've got no idea, we're just enjoying the show, but there's this whole panicked element of, why are they not into this? Number 4, he pitched his own heel turn. Now, if you cast your minds all the way back to 2018, Bobby Lashley turned up on the Raw after WrestleMania 34, and he got a pretty good reaction from the fans. They were very happy to see him, and it seemed like maybe keeping him in the role of a babyface would be a good idea for the short term. But of course, the real question is, how long can that last before the fans inevitably get bored? And Lashley said it was very much on his mind, and he started to get little itchy feet when thinking about how long he had left in terms of the good graces. So he went to Vince and he pitched that he wanted to turn heel because that is where he felt like he could excel. And in fairness, he wasn't wrong, was he? He was treading water as a mid-card babyface. I mean, remember that terrible stuff with Sami Zayn? That was not great at all. So he'd been pushing for this heel turn from around about the early summer, but he said it wasn't until October 8th where Vince finally pulled the trigger and he beat down Kevin Owens. Immediately after that Kevin Owens angle, suddenly Lashley felt revitalised, suddenly the character seemed a little bit more interesting, and then of course they paired him with Leo Rush, and what a partnership that would turn out to be. All of that leads to where we are today, and I think Bobby was right. Number 3, the reality behind the Hurt Business. Now, before we go any further, can you just answer a question for me? Take a look at this picture and you tell me how on earth you can look at this and think, what a great idea it would be to break up this really successful money-making act. Anyway, deep love for the Hurt Business to one side for a second. Lashley told Austin that he wanted to give him the lowdown on what the whole thing was meant to be about in the first place. It wasn't ever meant to be about skin colour. This was meant to be about Lashley and MVP taking some talents from the WWE roster who'd been overlooked. Gosh, I wonder where they'll find any of those. There's so few of them, and deciding to try and shine a spotlight on these guys and just give them a chance to prove themselves. Another interesting detail as well came from the fact that Lashley said the whole aesthetic of the Hurt Business, I think we can all agree, a pretty great aesthetic at that, was decided because Lashley was so frustrated with the restrictive dress code from the last time he was working with WWE. So all the fancy suits and the power play look as they walk into buildings feeling like the absolute finished article, that was all his idea too, and it was loved by everyone, including, of course, Vince McMahon. And an even better tidbit than that was that Lashley and MVP said they had to be very careful when pitching working together to both Vince and Triple H. Obviously the two of them had worked in TNA and they didn't want them getting wind of any of that, because as soon as they did, they might have felt like what they were pitching wasn't an original idea and it wasn't something that they would have ownership over. So they had to really make sure that they didn't think of anything to do with TNA and that this was a fresh and new idea. Number 2, MVP's loss is Lashley's gain. Here's a fun fact for you. Back in 2014, Bobby Lashley was not supposed to be the one who took the belt off Eric Young in TNA. It was in fact supposed to be MVP. He got injured though, unfortunately, couldn't compete in the match, so they had to change the direction the company went in, and thus Lashley became the champ. And that would sort of ring true in WWE as well, albeit slightly more in kayfabe this time, because when MVP did legitimately get injured last year, that started the wheels in motion towards what would eventually become the world title run for Bobby Lashley. Naturally, of course, the irony wasn't lost on either man, and Lashley even said to Austin he was talking about how he and MVP had been laughing about it, and he'd even joked, hey, if you get injured again, I'm going to beat Roman. And while of course you genuinely can't rule out Lashley having a universal title run somewhere down the line, the one thing this highlighted to me is that even in interviews, the guys in the back know that Roman Reigns is the man to beat in WWE. And number 1, with a bullet, how long he thinks he has left. And finally, we got the answer to the question of how long Bobby Lashley thinks he has left as an active and full-time roster member for the WWE. Now, it doesn't exactly take a man with a set of binoculars to realise that Bobby Lashley is in fantastic condition, and Austin said as much himself and was curious to know how long Lashley felt he had left and didn't see him really slowing down anytime soon. Lashley agreed, but was quick to say that he feels he's probably got 5 years left of solid ring time before he hangs up his tights, and there's a reason for that. He says he doesn't want to find himself ever losing a step, so rather than taking a step back, he'd rather just take a step away. His pride of being able to compete at the very top level is something he seems to take very seriously, and he says this isn't just exclusive to pro wrestling either. Back when he was having his fighting career, he'd ask people to tell him if they ever thought like he was losing a step. So as it stands, the man is the WWE champion. He's an absolute specimen. He's not going anywhere, but come 2026, might be a different story. So there you have it then. Those are all the things we learned from Bobby Lashley on Stone Cold Steve Austin's Broken Skull Sessions podcast. Let us know your thoughts about the interview and about this video in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and share. Hit the old subscribe if you haven't already. You can find the original article for this at whatculture.com/WWE. You can follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. You can follow me on Twitter if that's your thing at It's Adam Nicholas. Or if you just want some more videos, there should be some at the end of this one. I've been Adam Nicholas, this has been What Culture Wrestling, and we will undoubtedly see you the next time they bring out one of these.